Every decision you make today will be influenced by at least one of these 7 cognitive biases. They are built into the architecture of the human brain, the result of millions of years of evolutionary shortcuts. These shortcuts were designed to help our ancestors survive in a very different world than the one we live in now. The problem is that these shortcuts are actively working against your best interests in the complex, information-rich modern world. Understanding them will give you something crucial: the ability to catch yourself mid-bias and choose differently. Bias number 1 is the sunk cost fallacy. This is the tendency to continue investing in something, time, money, or energy, because of what you have already put in, even when the rational analysis clearly says you should stop. The sunk cost fallacy is behind the person who stays in a dead-end relationship for years because of how much they have already invested. It is behind the investor who holds a terrible stock far too long because they cannot accept the loss. It is behind the person who finishes a terrible book or a bad movie because they already started it.
Research in Behavioral Economics by Richard Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize for his work on this topic, has consistently shown that humans weight losses much more heavily than gains, and that past investments, which are by definition irretrievable, distort our forward-looking judgments dramatically. The correct question when evaluating any continuing commitment is never, "How much have I already put in?" The correct question is always, "Given where I am right now, is continuing the best path forward?" Bias number 2 is anchoring. When we are exposed to a piece of initial information, even a completely arbitrary number, it creates a mental anchor that disproportionately influences all of our subsequent judgments in that domain. In a famous demonstration, researchers asked participants to spin a wheel that stopped at either 10 or 65. The outcome was rigged. They then asked participants to estimate the percentage of African countries in the United Nations. People who landed on 10 guessed around 25%. People who landed on 65 guessed around 45%. The random number had nothing to do with the question, but it profoundly influenced the answer. Anchoring is exploited constantly in retail pricing, salary negotiation, and legal settlements. The first number put on the table in any negotiation becomes the gravitational center around which all subsequent discussion orbits. Knowing this, the prescription is simple. Whenever you are making an important numerical judgment, actively generate your own independent estimate before allowing any external number to enter your consideration.
Bias number 3 is the availability heuristic, which we touched on in an earlier video but deserves deeper exploration here. Your brain estimates the likelihood of events not by calculating actual probabilities, but by how easily examples come to mind. Events that are vivid, recent, emotionally charged, or extensively covered by media feel more probable than they statistically are. Events that are boring, common, or rarely discussed feel less probable. This single bias distorts risk assessment in ways that cause enormous real-world harm. People spend billions on plane tickets, insurance, and lottery tickets, while underestimating the risks of car travel and high-calorie diet. Medical decisions are distorted by memorable individual cases rather than statistical base rates, and perhaps most damagingly, the availability heuristic makes us dramatically overestimate the competence of people who are simply more visible and vocal. Bias number 4 is the status quo bias, the deep psychological tendency to prefer the current state of affairs over any alternative. Research by William Samuelson and Richard Zeckhauser at Harvard demonstrated this with clear experimental evidence. People systematically avoid changing from a default option, even when they explicitly acknowledge that a different option would serve them better. The status quo bias is why people stay in jobs they hate, keep the same financial products for years, and maintain habits they know are harmful. and they resist making changes that their rational mind clearly endorses. Understanding these biases is the first step to overcoming them. The evolutionary logic behind this bias is understandable. In environments of genuine uncertainty, the known quantity carries less risk than the unknown. But in modern life, where better options are frequently available, this bias functions as a silent anchor, keeping you exactly where you are. Bias number 5 is the in-group bias. The automatic tendency to favor, trust, and positively evaluate members of groups we belong to, while viewing members of outgroups less charitably. Research in social psychology, dating back to Henri Tajfel's work in the 1970s, showed that the mere act of categorizing people into groups, even on the most trivial basis, immediately produces in-group favoritism and out-group discrimination. Your brain evaluates the same behavior, the same argument, and the same person very differently, depending on whether they belong to your perceived group. This bias shapes hiring decisions, legal judgments, political evaluations, and interpersonal trust in ways that are both profound and largely invisible. Recognizing in-group bias does not eliminate it, but it does create the possibility of deliberately stepping back and asking, am I evaluating this person or idea on its merits, or on the basis of which group it comes from?
Bias number 6 is the planning fallacy, identified by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky as the near-universal tendency to underestimate how long tasks take. People underestimate costs and obstacles, even when they have extensive experience with similar tasks and their previous predictions have been systematically wrong. Research shows that people estimate their own projects will take about half as long as they actually do. Large-scale public infrastructure projects on average cost twice what was budgeted and take 50% longer than planned. Personal projects, home renovations, business plans, personal goals show the same pattern with remarkable consistency. The planning fallacy is not simply about optimism. It is about the fundamental way the human brain approaches future scenarios. Your brain defaults to imagining the best-case scenario unfolding smoothly, rather than accounting for setbacks, complications, and competing demands. The research-backed correction is called reference class forecasting. Before estimating your current project, look at how long similar projects actually took in the past. Your past projects are a far better predictor than your internal optimistic model. Bias number 7 is the Dunning-Kruger effect, perhaps the most consequential bias for how it shapes human society and discourse. People with low competence in a domain dramatically overestimate their own ability, while people with high competence tend to underestimate theirs. The full picture is more complex. It is not simply that stupid people think they are smart. It is that all of us, in domains where our knowledge is incomplete, lack the metacognitive tools to accurately assess our own competence. We do not know what we do not know. And because we cannot perceive the gap in our knowledge, we cannot accurately estimate its size. The practical antidote to the Dunning-Kruger effect is genuine intellectual humility, combined with active exposure to genuine expertise. Seek out people who know more than you do about important topics. Read primary sources rather than summaries. Test your understanding by trying to explain complex ideas clearly and simply. If you cannot explain it simply, you do not understand it well. Cultivate the habit of treating your own confident opinions as hypotheses to be tested rather than conclusions to be defended. If you found this video useful, please like it, share it, and leave a comment about which bias you recognize most in your thinking. Subscribe for more psychology content that helps you navigate your own mind more effectively. Thank you for watching. Before we close, it is worth addressing a common question. If these biases are so powerful, is rational, unbiased thinking even possible? The honest answer is, impartially and with effort. We are not rational machines that occasionally malfunction. We are emotional, social, intuitive creatures who are capable of rational analysis when we deliberately engage it. Daniel Kahneman's model describes thinking in two modes: System 1, fast, automatic, and intuitive, and System 2, slow, deliberate, and analytical. Most daily thinking runs on System 1. It would be impossibly exhausting to engage System 2 for every minor decision. But for the decisions that matter most, like significant financial choices, we must learn to slow down and engage our analytical mind. Relationship decisions, career moves, and important judgments about people and situations, deliberately engaging System 2 and running our intuitions through a more deliberate analytical process dramatically reduces the distorting effect of cognitive biases. Some structural strategies include pre-mortem analysis, imagining that your decision has led to a catastrophic outcome and working backward to identify what could have caused it. This technique systematically surfaces the planning fallacy, sunk cost thinking, and anchoring effects before a decision is finalized. Another strategy is seeking out alternative hypotheses, deliberately generating the best possible arguments for the position opposite to the one you currently hold. This combats confirmation bias more effectively than simply trying to be open-minded. A third strategy is creating decision journals, writing down your predictions and reasoning. This process reveals your actual bias patterns in a way that no amount of abstract self-awareness can match. The goal is not to be an unfeeling logic machine. Emotion and intuition carry genuine wisdom, particularly in domains where you have substantial experience. The goal is to know yourself well enough to know when your intuition is reliable, and when the situation calls for the slower, more effortful analysis that your brain is able to provide. If this was valuable, please like, share, and subscribe.